Recently, the Lowit Thibault Larson Engineering Group became aware of a farming issue near the Farm River, which is a river that leads into the Long Island Sound in central Connecticut that is near the central basin of the Long Island Sound. We have been hearing of issues that have been caused by flooding of the Farm River. When the brackish water of the Long Island Sound is being pushed up onto the riverbanks, the salty water is being absorbed by the soil, and it is making it harder to grow crops, as salt can greatly affect the germination process of a seed. We are here to help the Farm River Farmers Association prevent, deal with, and/or get rid of the salt in the most cost-effective and environmentally friendly way as possible. In this presentation, we will first start off with the general background information on the Long Island Sound. Then we'll talk about some of our testing, and then give you some ideas on how to deal with these issues.
First, we want to give you some background information on the Long Island Sound to help you better understand why this is occurring. The Long Island Sound is an area of water off the coast of Connecticut. It consists of 3 sections: the Western Basin, the Central Basin, and the Eastern Basin. Each basin has a different salinity content. The closer to the western end it gets, the lower the salinity. The Eastern Basin is the area connected to the Atlantic Ocean, hence why its salt concentration is higher.
The Long Island Sound contains water that can be classified using the term brackish water. Brackish water means that the water is a mix of salt and fresh water. Brackish water is usually found where rivers meet the ocean. These places are also known as estuaries. This means the water flooding your farms has a higher salinity content than fresh water, but isn't as salty as ocean water. This is less unfavorable because the less salt we are dealing with, the easier it will be to solve these issues. The Farm River is located near the Central Basin area of the Long Island Sound. To better combat the issues caused by the flooding, we need to understand the salinity of the area so we know the amount of salt we are dealing with, as this makes dealing with the issue easier. The salinity of Long Island Sound is 23 parts per thousand on the western end and 35 parts per thousand on the eastern end. Farm River is located in the Central Basin of Long Island Sound, so it has a salinity that is the mean of the two values. We calculated the center of Long Island Sound to be approximately 29 parts per thousand.
In order to better understand these numbers, we will convert salinity in parts per thousand into percent. Since the salinity is represented in parts per thousand, we can simply move the decimal place to the left one time to make it out of 100, which is a percent. That means that the salt concentration is 2.9% in the central Basin. Therefore, giving us a number to work with that somewhat accurately represents the water that is flooding your farmland.
To deal with these problems in a more effective manner, we must also understand the germination process so we can find out why salt might be interrupting said process. The initial part of seed growth is called germination. The process of germination starts with water and a dormant seed, a seed that hasn't been exposed to the specific environmental condition it needs to germinate.
Water, light, temperature, time, and the amount of oxygen in the air are all external factors in the start of germination. In permission, the process of water breaking the seed coat is the start of germination. The seed then begins to duplicate its cells and make proteins and metabolize. This is called interm. After those two processes exceed a certain point, the radicle, also known as the primary root, emerges and grounds itself into the soil.
In the water around the seed, it can interfere with the initial process of breaking the seed coat. Normally, the water around the seed coat has a similar concentration of salt and minerals in comparison to the inside of the seed, if not a lesser concentration. On the two sides of a membrane, the natural processes will want to make the concentration of salt or the solution equivalent on both sides of the membrane. In this case, the membrane is the seed coat. Since the solvent is normally higher inside the seed, the water rushes in the seed through the process of osmosis and fills up the seed with water, eventually breaking the seed coat and beginning the process of germination. This state is referred to as hypotonic, and most plants need a constant hypotonic environment to live in so that the water can move through the plant easily. This keeps the plant hydrated and healthy.
But with a greater salt concentration in the water, this all changes. The seed has water and salt inside. The solution around it has a greater concentration of solute. In an effort to make the solute concentration equal, water rushes out of the seed to dilute the salt around it, and the salt rushes into the seed to make the salt concentration equivalent on both sides of the membrane. This makes it hard for the seed coat to expand and break, causing the germination process. This property is sometimes referred to as a hypertonic solution. But all we need to understand for this experiment is that the salt is hindering the seed coat's ability to break, which is why our plants cannot grow in these flooded conditions. Along with not allowing the seed coat to break, once salt enters the plant, it also breaks down into sodium and chloride ions, which can be very toxic to the plant.
Before addressing how we will find out the salt toleration level of radishes, we would first like to briefly touch on why this flooding has been occurring. Climate change is a newly identified issue that is facing our planet. Put simply, it is the changes of our global environment due to human activity on Earth. When we first think of climate change, we usually think of the temperature increase due to the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the trapping of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere due to production of excess carbon dioxide from human actions, like driving cars and creating factories. Carbon dioxide is not only simply trapped in the atmosphere, but it also absorbs heat, which is causing our global temperature to rise by 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit per year, according to NASA.
This is not simply a matter of a warmer summer, though. It is causing many issues in our ecosystems around the world. One of the major issues associated with this is the idea of our sea levels rising. As the temperature continues to rise at an alarming rate, the polar ice caps and glaciers at our poles are beginning to melt. This is adding more water into our oceans and making them rise.
At 3.2 millimeters per year and will rise 3.2 feet by the year 2100, according to the Washington Post. This rise in sea level is making storms more extreme, tides more extreme, and flooding a reality for anyone living or working near the shoreline. This could be part of the reason why this flooding has been occurring lately. But we cannot fix this issue on this large of a scale. We can only deal with its effects. We will be approaching the problem in 4 different ways: the removal and neutralization of the original salt in the soil, dealing with the present flooding issues, preventing further flooding in the future, and finding the maximum salt a crop can germinate under. With these 4 aspects, we should be able to create a solution that will deal with all issues and effects of the problem.
Solution for you. You will first be testing the salinity threshold of a radish seed to see if it is simply the plant that is the issue, or if it is the salt that's the issue. This will also tell us how much we need to reduce the salinity in order to get your yield back to normal. We will be testing this with a simple experiment that will see what conditions a radish seed can germinate under.
The way in which we will be conducting the experiment is we will take 20 radish seeds per trial and try to germinate them in different concentrations of water, including 0%, 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%, 2%, 2.5%, and 3% salt concentration of the water. We know the salinity of the Long Island Sound is around 2.9%, so this number is represented by the 3% salt concentration trial. The other salt concentrations are there so that we can see when the salt becomes too much and throws off the balance between the water concentration inside and outside the seed. We took the radish seeds and divvied them up into groups. Each group was exposed to a different salt concentration and was left for 5 days to see if the seeds would germinate or not. At the end of the 5 days, we counted the number of seeds that germinated out of the 20 per salt concentration and gave us an indication of the crop failure that would occur if the salt concentration went up or down. Knowing this information will give us a goal number to reduce the salinity to, so that we can make sure that the salt concentration is low enough so that you won't suffer the success rate of your crops in an alarming manner.
As scientists, prior to the experiment, we hypothesized our results to see if our research was correct. We thought that if we add different amounts of salt in different solutions to the radish seeds, then the radish seeds will germinate from solutions at a 0% to 1% salt concentration gradient because they have a lower salinity than the farm has, which is a 2 to 3% salt concentration where the radish seeds start germinating. We think this is because we know the seeds aren't germinating under the 2.9% solution, and because this 2.9% can vary, we estimated that the spot in which the salt would be completely detrimental to the plant growth was a little less than 2.9%, our estimation being at 2%.
The official results of our experiment was 0% salt concentration had 20 out of 20 of the seeds germinate. The 0.5% salt concentration had 19 out of the 20 seeds germinate. The 1% salt concentration had 18 out of the 20 seeds germinate. The 1.5 salt concentration had 10 out of the 20 seeds germinate. And the 2, 2.5, and the 3% salt solutions had 0 seeds out of 20 germinate. All of these numbers were based on 3 trials of the experiment per solution.
In a nutshell, these numbers tell us that we should aim to get the salt concentration down to around 0 to 1% in order to keep the germination rate around 90% to make sure that you can maintain your farms and have enough crops to sell.
Now we'll be talking about possible solutions, or things you can do to prevent flooding, fix your crops, remove the salt, or lower the concentration of the salt. The first thing we would like to point out is the idea of changing your crop type. Currently, you are planting radishes, but there are many other options to choose from. A potential option could be planting halophytes. Halophytes are plants that have a higher tolerance for salt, and therefore can live in places with a higher salinity content, like marshes or estuaries. One common example of a halophyte is a mangrove plant. These types of trees live in brackish water, as they have adapted over time to the salty conditions and developed methods of filtering the salt from the brackish water to get the fresh water they need to survive. The mangroves have different ways to deal with the salt. Some excrete salt through their leaves, while others have roots that block the salt from entering. An example of a halophyte that creates a marketable crop is barley. This may be a favorable idea, as you can still be selling a plant, but you could also be adapting to the environment's salinity. This is also an extremely cost-effective option, as barley can sell at around $9 a pound, while radishes sell at around $1.5 a pound.
Another idea could be to look into GMOs. The term GMO stands for genetically modified organism. Genetically modified organisms are living things that have artificially inserted genes from another plant or animal in their DNA. The genes can come from multiple sources, such as viruses, bacteria, plants, insects, and animals. An organism that has genes from another separate organism is called a transgenic organism. One way GMOs could be used to help the farmer is if they genetically engineered the virus seed to be tolerant to a higher concentration of salt.
Another solution that you could try is selective breeding. Selective breeding is when humans pick the best plants or animals due to certain qualities and force them to breed to create a group of plants superior to the rest of its species due to the inheritance of a specific positive trait. An example of selective breeding that you have probably seen is dogs. Humans will breed dogs whom are more obedient or more friendly together in order to keep those traits in dogs. Humans will also take purebred dogs and mate them with other purebred dogs in an effort to keep that dog type the same and continue to have this particular trait show. You can implement these ideas by growing radishes in salty conditions until one seed can germinate. This seed will potentially have adapted to the environment and has the traits necessary to survive in these harsher conditions. After finding 2 of the plants, you can pollinate these plants manually and collect the seeds created by the plants. These seeds will most likely carry the trait that is resistant to the salt, and after a few more breedings, you will have created a group of radishes that can successfully grow in these conditions.
Also create a group of radishes that can withstand the salinity by using recombinant DNA, which, in simple terms, is altering the DNA of one plant or animal with another plant or animal's nucleotides. This can be effective because all living things are made from the same nucleotides: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. By taking genes from a plant that can withstand high salt concentrations and using it to alter the DNA of a radish, scientists could potentially create a solution to the issues of radish germination being hindered. In order to do this, scientists would have to alter how a radish germinates by removing the area of the DNA that codes for that, making it the host plasmid, and completing that host with sticky ends, which are the new nucleotide sequences with those germination features from a different plant into the host plasmid. This would then create a superior radish seed.
A simple method that you could use to lower the salt concentration of your flooded fields is to simply dilute the flooded water on your fields by spraying down your fields with a fresh water solution. This would lower the salt to water ratio and lower the hypertonicity of the solution, making it easier for the plants to germinate. The only issue with the solution is that you could potentially flood your fields, which could cause more issues for your plants.
Another thing you could do to your fields is to add calcium to your fields. Calcium is a known factor in stabilizing cell membranes and creating proteins that can tell a cell membrane not to allow sodium ions into the plant membrane. By adding the calcium, you are making it so that the plant is forcibly not allowing sodium into the membrane, which reduces these issues created by the hypertonicity of the solution around the seed. Calcium also creates an enzyme that tells vacuoles in the plants to release sodium ions, preventing an unhealthy buildup of NaCl in the plant, which can be detrimental in the long run. Along with these pros, calcium is also a great nutrient for the plants.
You could also raise the beds of the seeds in order to prevent the seed beds from incoming floodwaters from the farm river. This would be a long-term plan that would help to reduce these issues in the future.
A final piece of the solution to present to you is potentially creating a drainage system along the edge of your farm and on the riverbeds to drain out flood waters to nearby ponds, rivers, lakes, or even the Long Island Sound to keep the flood waters from flooding your farms. You could do this by digging trenches and placing draining pipes out of them that lead to other bodies of water to stop the issue in the future before it can even occur.
Overall, there are many options to deal with the flooding issues on the Farm River, and thanks for choosing the Lowett Tebow Larson Engineering Group to help the farmers of Farm River in these times of need.